Made possible through support from ARC Thrift Stores, Colorado Developmental Disabilities Council, Developmental Pathways, and the Arc of Aurora. A THINK+change training.
Hey there, thank you so much for joining us here again for another episode within our multi-part series talking all about substance abuse, people with developmental and other disabilities, as well as policy gaps. But this episode is specifically talking about barriers to substance abuse treatment for people with developmental disabilities. If you have a moment, might you introduce yourself, who you are, what you do, and all that good stuff?
I would be happy to. Hi, Erica. I am Chad Johnston, MD, doctor. I've been doing internal medicine for about 10 years before I moved here to Denver, at which time I've been working strictly addiction. So that's been since 17, so the last 6 years here. Work downtown Denver, providing our services for, the tough population actually across the whole Denver area and other states as well, and the other side of this state, which we need more and more treatment facilities.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate the good work that you are doing in our community to help those struggling with addiction and substance abuse disorders. So thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
So as we kind of dive in, might you share what does it mean to be in recovery or be a recovered addict? And I don't even know if the terminology I'm using is what you would even use in the work that you're doing.
Yes, kind of what it comes down to is the root of those words of recovery, recovering versus recovered, and is it an ongoing process?
Sure.
And that pretty much is, I don't think we can kind of say it's what everybody feels, but it is kind of how you feel this disease works. And me personally, I do feel like it's an ongoing process. It's something that we've gone through at a younger, earlier age or even in a later age, but it has such an impact on our life and changes our life so dramatically. I can't say that, that's going to ever be a process that stops.
I see.
And plus it's a chance to always grow and improve yourself and be a better person.
Yeah. I mean, I think it takes many different milestones, I think, for someone to kind of go through the motions.
Yep. And so many different ways. Everybody has their own path.
Yeah.
You just have to help them along.
Can't be one size fits all,
No.
I'm sure.
No, does not work.
Would you say, does treatment and recovery look different for people with disabilities?
There's without a doubt, there's a difference. It's a hard road. We can make it easier by having support around us with the right resources. But unfortunately, the population with disabilities is we are still not providing that for them. I don't want to say they have a harder go at it, but when you look at the numbers out there, the general population, around 30% deals with addiction. In the disability world, about 60%. So there's something that's going on there. And I have to believe that it is the disabilities themselves that make it more difficult for a patient to get through their daily lives and stay sober.
Yeah. And there's so many unique nuances that accompany disability. I mean, there's what we work with here through THINK+change at the organization I'm at the Arc of Aurora. I mean, our bread and butter is people with developmental disabilities, but then there's people who have a physical disability, an acquired disability.
Yes.
Perhaps it's mental illness. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. I mean, those are just scratching the surface few
Right.
examples. So everyone's lived experience, is very different. Yeah.
Very different. And we have to open up to that and realize one treatment does not fit all.
Exactly.
But at the same time, we still have to include everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everyone needs to be included. And we talk
Yes.
about that so often here, is that oftentimes I think people with disabilities are it's kind of an afterthought with including them within the everyday access to what is available out there, whether it's treatment, whether
Yep.
it's, other issues maybe impacting them and the communities. And so I think really being mindful about that
Yes.
and helping the bigger population understanding that there is a need out there is really huge.
Yeah, we see that we've tried, or we continue to try to make the races equal. This is another step. This is another group out there that we have to extend this that much further to incorporate them. It's going to be a lot of work of showing the problem to everybody.
Yeah.
Making sure everybody sees this.
Agreed. When we are talking about harm reduction, this may be a very new concept for someone who may be tuning in. Might you share, information about that and what harm reduction is?
Yeah. So when you're, talking about actual harm reduction, it's taking, you're working with the community for sure, without a doubt. And it's all about trying to come up with this approach where you enact these policies that's going to benefit not only the patient, but it's going to benefit the community as well. I think where the problem comes with this group is that when they talk about harm reduction, they're willing to go to any extent to make sure we save a life. So that does include providing clean needles and maybe a safe place. And it's more about opening our minds to this disease and understanding it better so that we can treat people better. So with the harm reduction, we have to have that work there. And it has to be done because that's what's really getting down and saving their lives, getting the Narcan out there, all these initiatives that they usually take on. So I know it could be controversial, but we have to have it.
Yeah. My first experience, you talk about the clean needle exchange.
Yeah.
My first experience actually seeing that was just this year on a family trip to San Francisco. And there is an area that I'm not from California, but from what I learned while we were out there is that there was an area within San Francisco where people were really struggling with addiction and just needles and them not being clean. And my first experience was seeing I felt like almost half a block of a clean needle exchange program. And that was just my first experience. I mean, this was like 8 months ago.
Right.
And so when you're talking about this, I mean, it sounds, is it like a newer concept? I mean, or has it been around for a while?
No, it's definitely been around. I think as we've come into the age of more drugs that deal with needles, even though heroin has been around for many, many years, I think we're finding, or we're trying more and more different strategies to approach this problem. And this is one that, we've come up with, I would say probably within, I don't know for sure, but easily within the last 20 years.
Wow. Okay.
I know it is surprising that you just now see that.
Yeah, it is.
Because we don't need to hide them, but that's almost an automatic thought is to hide them. But you want folks to be somewhat comfortable with this topic, but that's a tough area.
Yeah, for sure. And you had mentioned previously when you were kind of giving an introduction to what harm reduction is, you had mentioned Narcan.
Yeah.
If someone tuning in is unfamiliar with what Narcan is, might you explain a little bit about what that is?
Narcan is a complete antagonist, so it completely blocks the opiate receptor sites, which means when it goes in, it can knock anything off that's on those opiate receptor sites. It's going to take anything off, it's going to bind, and it does not have the same actions as the opiate. It has the exact opposite. It shuts everything down, and so you go into immediate withdrawal, but you are saved.
Got it. And so generally from what I've read about Narcan is oftentimes it's a nasal spray.
Right.
And then someone can administer it to someone who thinks that someone may have overdose. So there's the signs of overdose are
the actual non-response. You should not be able to respond, by sternal rub or shaking them vigorously, trying to get any sort of response. You have no response. They're starting to change color. You're feeling for a pulse. No pulse. It's time to
administer Narcan.
And it's also a medication that if they're not, do not have opiates in them, you're not going to do harm.
Ah, okay. So
Yeah.
generally speaking, Narcan is specifically for opioids, but
Opiates.
it could be used for other drugs.
No,
No, it's
it is
specifically.
specifically for opiates.
Got
Yeah.
it. Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. Very interesting. There's a lot to learn within
Yeah,
this
there's
realm.
just so much.
I
Yes.
appreciate the breakdown, though.
Yeah.
When you were just talking about harm reduction, and you had mentioned that it often can be viewed as kind of a controversial topic. I mean,
Right.
we're talking about clean needle exchange programs,
Yes.
things like that. Why would one consider using harm reduction? Like, what are the benefits to the individual and society?
Yeah. So what you're trying to provide there for the individual is a way for them, or provide resources and tools for them to make that positive change in their life. These are the people that are on the front lines, have not made the decision to go to treatment. So they're still in that area, or that part in their thought process. But to try to get them over, it's enticing with, okay, we can provide you this resource, but we also want to introduce you to this as well. The possibilities of treatment,
Got it.
housing, food, everything. Once they can kind of get them in there, they try to provide whatever they can.
Got it. Got it. Oh, there's a concept. It's totally lost. It's slipped my mind, but the concept, it's almost like when you have like continuity of care, like you talk
Yeah.
about, like if you have access to like housing, education, your basic needs are met, it kind of makes not only you, but the society as a whole improve.
Right.
Yeah.
With the transition of care, it has been an area that we have failed tremendously. And I would say, Jesus, I've been doing this for probably 15 years, and it has always been a problem where we drop our care, or lack of care, is when the patient is moving from one facility to the next, stepping down care, stepping up care. It's that communication between providers, between the family. I actually had a patient that it was a confusing time. The patient went from one facility to another one. The second one said they didn't know who she was. She ended up overdosing.
Oh my.
Yeah, because the process wasn't where it should be.
Yeah. The systems aren't talking with each other.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I know your world is all, substance abuse and treatment. The world that
Right.
I'm in is all developmental disabilities in that system. And so as you're talking, I mean, those are two systems, right? That
Right.
Are they talking to each other?
Not at this time. I don't think so.
And so that's something certainly to consider, I think, when
Right.
we're talking about a loss of communication and how that can impact someone with the recovery and
Right.
staying clean.
Because as a provider, if I don't understand what you're going through,
Yeah.
I don't think I can help you very well. In fact, I can probably do harm,
Oh my. Yeah.
if I don't understand your struggles. And so we have to make that apparent when you come along a patient with disabilities. It does take extra time. It does take extra consideration to make sure everything is T's are crossed, I's are dotted.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, and we also, a lot of times, folks who receive services and supports within the developmental disability system, at least here in Colorado, where we are, the system within that usually generally talks with each other, right? But and generally the system will know, oh, this person needs things broken down a little bit easier for them when they're explaining things, or whatever it may be. But as someone in your position, if you're unfamiliar with,
Right.
What's available, that can also put you in a really tricky spot too.
Yeah. So eventually, hopefully, we will see representatives from your community
Yeah.
coming over to our community and teaching us.
Yeah, for sure.
And that includes too providing the education, providing what I normally teach to a patient. I need to make sure that can also be picked up easily by someone that comes in with a disability.
Sure.
And it's just, I believe it's not there yet in the curriculum when it comes to addiction. We're still trying to figure out, well, we've come a long ways with our treatments and understanding the disease, and it is time to make sure we include everyone
Absolutely.
with this.
oftentimes I think people with disabilities are often left out of the conversation with making sure that they can access equitable treatment just like anyone else.
Or they're not given the information because the provider doesn't think the patient can understand it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Big mistake.
Big mistake.
It comes down to the training. If we can start getting this idea, get it into even medical school level, and as the training continues, because now addiction has a full fellowship to go through it. This is what needs to be included in those curriculums.
Yeah.
So that we understand, because when we look at the numbers between the general population, 30% addiction, and within the developmental community, 60% addiction. If that number was in any other part of society, I feel like maybe we'd respond quicker. But the problem's there. It's right there. We see that. Why are we not responding? We need to respond more aggressively. Mm-hmm. And it's getting everybody to listen.
Yeah. And I mean, that could be so many things. It could be exactly what you're talking about with just more training and education when it comes to just like your first step in joining this field.
Yep.
I mean, even broader, it could certainly be people sharing their lived experience at a policy, systemic type level, sharing people's unique stories to make sure that, systems are in place so that people can get access to the addiction treatment that they need.
And get those systems in place.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Still lots more work to do in that, I would say.
Right. We're when it comes to medications, we do have the REMS, the REMS, which is risk evaluation mitigation strategy. It's taking those at-risk medications, applying several requirements so that we ensure that the benefits outweigh the risks.
Yeah.
Opiates, antipsychotics, drugs like that, so that we're not doing more harm than good.
Certainly.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's definitely a lot to consider.
Yes, there is. There's so many aspects when it comes to treatment and someone able to function well throughout the day. I know I'm not in tune or educated as much as I should be as when I have a patient come in with a disability to really understand what they are going through. Mm-hmm. I do the addiction part because I have gone through that and I do understand that. And so I need to continue with my education.
Yeah. Well, I even just appreciate you being so transparent and vulnerable, saying, hi, I'm a doctor and I too, we all benefit from more education.
Yes.
And, I appreciate you sharing that because it certainly is a way that I think that we can improve access in all systems, right? It's not just addiction, but it certainly could be something that we could take a closer look at within our society, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, another question that I have are, what are some of the negative attitudes or misconceptions that you feel society may have about people with developmental or other disabilities who are struggling with addiction, and how can we address these biases?
From what I've seen in the patients that I've dealt with, I feel like I get a feeling from other providers or just the general public is that these patients won't do as well. And I don't understand that one because they always do. In fact, a lot of times they do better. But this bias is another bias that they have to deal with to overcome just to receive treatment. Mm-hmm. And if we don't understand what we're doing, if we don't understand that we have that bias, I'm not sure how we're going to stop it. But again, we've got to get out there and talk to the folks in charge and get the new policies and those education to get those providers to seriously help those with with disability needs.
Yeah, certainly. And I mean, as you're talking, I also think about, you're talking about biases and maybe someone's just going to assume that maybe someone who has a developmental disability wouldn't understand what's happening, but there certainly are things that can be done to help them move through the waves of their treatment. Something that we have seen before is that I have a colleague who always says, save baby talk for your dog.
Yes.
Because we'll have people that will talk to someone who has 40 years of lived experience, and they go and see their doctor, but the doctor knows that the person has a developmental disability, and they perceive that person to maybe not be a 40-year-old
Right.
person. And so they
Right.
talk to them in baby talk.
Yeah.
I mean, even those little teeny steps is
And
just
yes.
a way to shift perspective and improve when it comes to addressing those biases.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when it comes to addiction, and I'm sure other illnesses, that can really hurt somebody. That
Yeah.
can really turn your treatment from good to bad.
Absolutely.
And they have to come out of that with that, that experience.
Yeah. And I would say definitely, I mean, I think the thought behind it, I always say, I always have great belief that most people really want to do the right thing, right?
Yes. Yes.
But I think until there are really, laws and policies that are in place that really have more, I don't know if I want to say integrated care models, but just kind of a better path for success for folks.
Right.
It makes me wonder how and if things can continue to improve.
If we decide if we want to put more money towards a certain problem, we have, like I said before, it's not a treatment that fits everybody, but generally we know what it takes to obtain sobriety and continue with it. Why we can't keep those in place or enact it, that's the difficult part.
Yeah.
Is why can't we just put that into place? Well, because there are so many factors out there that we just cannot control.
Yeah.
The best definition I've heard of addiction is a relapsing medical condition that deals with, I'm going to get this right. I think I actually wrote it down.
We always encourage people to have notes whenever we're doing our podcast, because it always helps us make sure we're not forgetting anything
Right.
important.
That involves the complex interactions among brain circuits, genetics, the environment, and an individual's life experience. Finally, because it seems like most of the time we get this compulsory behavior amidst, even though you're causing harm to yourself. Mm-hmm. It's like, yeah, it's good, but we understand that, but it takes all that, and that's why it can be such a difficult condition to treat. But that should also wake us up to realize we've got to put more towards this.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, those were all the formal questions I had for you for this episode. Do you have any last minute thoughts or anything on the tip of your tongue that you feel like would be helpful for folks to know as we close up this conversation?
Sounds like we need to change policies.
Yeah.
Somewhere at that level, so we can get people to listen.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Share your story, share your lived experience.
Yeah. Keep talking.
Keep talking about it. I think we can truly make change.
We can.
Through more advocacy and training and education.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
I really appreciate your valuable time and your perspective. To all of you tuning in, we hope that this was helpful, and continue to stay tuned on all things that we're rolling out through THINK+change. We are always trying to push the envelope with provocative and contemplative content. So until we see you next time, stay curious and take care.